Max Gorlin, Melbourne Football Club. You're listening to the Coaches Panel.
This is Nat Fyfe from the Fremantle Footy Club.
Trent Cotchin from the Richmond Footy Club.
Scott Pendlebury from the Collingwood Football Club. You're listening to the Coaches Panel.
Patrick Cooch from the Carlton Footy Club.
It's Rory Sloane here from the Adelaide Crows.
This is Tom Mitchell. You're listening to the Coaches Panel.
The third and probable final target for the Adelaide Crows has landed in this trade and free agency period. James Peatling is now an Adelaide Crow. How big of a win is this for the club? For the Giants, do they feel this as a loss or not? And for fantasy footy coaches in 2025, how big of a win for AFL Fantasy SuperCoach, Dream Team and Keeper is this for us heading into a new season? We'll talk about all of this and more on this latest episode, as right throughout this series, we review every player that moves clubs this trade and free agency period. James Peatling's probably pushed himself now into the top 3 best ever mid-season draftees. He's played 45 games. Let's be honest, Jai Newcomb is streets ahead of everybody else. But given this deal and the development we saw from James over this 2024 season, you could probably start to build a case that he's in the top 5 conversation. And if he's not yet, maybe in the next season or 2, he'll certainly be there. James is understandably a highly valued asset this offseason. The fact that a better part of a third of the AFL clubs at one point in another were hunting his signature does speak volumes to the upside he has shown this year and how important he could be and now should be for the Adelaide Crows heading into this new season. The thing that makes him so attractive for teams and for why he now is so potentially important for the Crows and a possible loss for the Giants is there's a lot of strings to his bow. Skills, strong, solid, has them. We wouldn't say he's elite, but certainly very, very handy player. Both sides of his body, uses the ball well by foot, clean by hand. He's got speed without any doubt, whether it be chasing down an opponent, putting pressure on with a tackle, getting himself into space and separation for an uncontested possession, or bursting out of congestion and winning a clearance. He's got some speed. But the thing I think clubs have most loved about him, and those 2 skills are important, is his physicality and his defensive pressure. He's somebody you do not want to get tackled by. This guy, you put him in a WWE wrestling ring, he's going to go full Goldberg, 90s kid, and absolutely spear tackle you. This guy, when he tackles you, they seem to stick. He's got some skills that a midfield and a midfielder wants to have in the modern day AFL. Look, it's not quite the same contrast, but there are shades to me of what Josh Dunkley is for Brisbane, is what I think the Crows are hoping he becomes for them. Maybe we should stay with the Crows now that we've alluded to them. How big of a win is this for them? Potentially incredibly significant. They have lacked for a number of areas in their list build through the midfield over a number of years. And the biggest knock they've had is a slow and one-dimensional midfield. The inclusion into the midfield of Jake Soligo this year has certainly done a lot to start to turn the corner of that. Isaac Rankin moving from an exclusive forward pest and freak inside forward 50, which he is, to now picking up 30, 40, maybe even some games 50% of midfield time, has again started to turn the corner where they're not just one trick pony of, good at clearance, good contested players, but no speed, no skill outside of winning the ball, and certainly not really high defensive pressure and presence. With the arrival of Peatling, I think they think this, alongside whoever they get with their first pick in the draft, should see this midfield now start to be more fully rounded. Soligo, Rankin, Dawson, Peatling, whichever young kid they get at their first pick in the draft, and then others such as Zach Taylor, Rankin. Does Rochelle roll through there at all? Let alone if they want to still go back to the future with a Matt Crouch. All of a sudden, this midfield does look a lot better when you throw in Peatling into the mix, both from a speed, a power, a physicality, and some skills around there. So I think Peatling for the Crows is a really important piece of the puzzle. But as big as a win it is for the Crows, I'm not completely sold it's a huge loss for the Giants. Now, granted, they wanted to keep James, and I think if they could, they happily would. But in his 17 games that he played this season, in the home and away season, 7 of those were sub. So it does lend itself to think this. How does the Giants, and certainly players AFL-wide and clubs AFL-wide, view the role of the sub? Is it players that are suited to speed, power, burst, impact, that are the best type of players to put in there? Because if that's the case, Peatling is absolutely someone that, for the Giants, has been a valuable sub. As I said, 7 of the 17 home and away games, he was in that role. But is it also a player that's not quite yet fully formed into the best 22? He was in and out of the side as well as being sub a fair chunk this year. Now, as the season wore on, fair flowers to James, he definitely was in that best 22. But is he locked inside before departing, inside their best 15 players when fully fit? That I'm not too sure about. And what we know about the Giants is they do have a few aging players that have rolled through their midfield, Cornelio and my boy Josh Kelly. Yep, I got him in the series. I found a way to get it done. It's probably the only time it's going to happen. So they are needing a rejuvenation of youngsters to come through. But with Green and Callahan, they're pretty set, let alone what they get at the draft this year and the young midfielders they've been developing nicely through the VFL and occasional midfield spurts over the past 12 to 24 months. So would the Giants prefer to keep James? Yeah, of course they would. But I don't think it's as big of a loss for them as we might be thinking. It's probably more indicative of where these two clubs are at. One is contending deep into finals, and a player like Peatling out is a little bit of loss for them, but they feel like they could cover that depth with relative ease. While for the Crows, this does feel like a significant win. It really does lend itself to show you just exactly where the clubs are at right now. That's not a knock on James or his skill set. I'm not doing that at all, but rather just showing how important the addition of Peatling is for the Crows is elevated in comparison to the loss for the Giants.
This episode is brought to you by Allstate. Some people just know they could save hundreds on car insurance by checking Allstate first. Like, you know, to check you have the tickets in your wallet first before you drive 2 hours to the big game. Seriously, you had one job. Now the closest you'll get to the 50-yard line is parking lot D. Yeah, checking first is smart. So check Allstate first for a quote that could save you hundreds. You're in good hands with Allstate. Savings vary. Terms apply. Allstate Fire and Casualty Insurance Company and Affiliates. Northbrook, Illinois.
What does this mean for us in fantasy footy in 2025? Oh boy, this could be really, really important for us. Now, there's one caveat. He held forward status for us in 2024. I'd love to tell you he's going to have it in 2025, but I'm not too sure that he does. I hold out very slim hopes that forward status will retain. I think he's a pure mid for us, and we certainly saw that how he was played through the team when he was sub, but played as a more pure mid, and towards the back end of the year, he did spend a little bit more time through there. So I think as much as I would love him to be forward, and if he was, man, his relevance absolutely skyrockets. But I think as a midfield-only option, we do need to temper the relevance conversation. That said, there was 2 AFL fantasy tons last year, including a 133, and a decent ton in there too in SuperCoach. I think it was 4 SuperCoach tons this year, and an average in and around the mid to early 60s across the formats. Now, a ton of those games, like I said, 7 of those games are sub-impacted. So the reality is his true average is an 85 in AFL fantasy and a 92 in SuperCoach in the games that he's not sub. So there's 20 to 30 points per game of value, depending on the format. Let's call it 25. Let's stop using hyperbole. 25 odd points per game of value So there's absolute upside, and it's coming into a team that his skills and his strengths are needed to be played. So I fully expect the Crows to play him through the midfield and to that to be his primary positioning, so that that mid-80s AFL fantasy average and low 90s SuperCoach average is about what we can forecast and expect. Now, in a salary cap format, that hits the threshold. Assume he can hit those scoring of free of sub games, so the 85 in fantasy, 92 SuperCoach. That hits kind of the 25 points per game threshold that I need as a minimum for a pure mid to consider them in our starting squad. And potentially a format like an AFL Fantasy, although SuperCoach with more trades and the higher volume that we've been getting year on year, it still might be similar there too. He does become someone that we could consider as a breakout candidate that could, yes, average 90 plus over the first 4, 5, 6 weeks and generate us really nice cash with strong points on field. So to rule him out of relevance in your salary cap formats is way too early. He absolutely has plenty of scoring upside and plenty of value to consider. It's probably going to be more structurally whether or not teams and coaches want to pick a player in this spot. Some look at that mid-60s range and go, I just can be stuck in a bit of no man's land. And while that's potentially true, a selection of a player like Peatling can be a simple parachute option. It doesn't work in a week or two. You drop all the way down to the cash cow that you missed. You jump on that mid-price guy that's absolutely flying. You use some DPP and all of a sudden you're away. So gone are the days where selecting a breakout candidate like a James Peatling who's proven to score well, albeit in a different team and system, but shown he's got fantasy chops at the elite level. I think avoiding breakout guys, and especially with the volume of trades we have now, well, our risk profile can go up a little bit. So I'm certainly, I got him in my black book and my watch list book for 2025 in Classic. Absolutely seriously considering that if I'm in that market of a mid-60s guy that could give me a month of 90s, maybe even longer. Yeah, I think Peatling does sit in that category of a consideration and someone to watch throughout the preseason. Draft is the one that really anything could happen. Draft to me with Peatling always depends on how much people have biases. If there's a Crows fan in your draft, you know they're going to want to get a hold of James. But to me, I think he's definitely someone that you could be picking at sort of that F6, not F6. If he was a forward, that'd be amazing. But a mid-6, mid-7, one of your last mids on field, if not bench, would be ideal. With the potential of him getting sort of M4 scoring range is absolutely within consideration. But I think if you're picking him any earlier than your 6th mid, you are running a gauntlet of high risk profile. So to me, someone's going to want him. The more preseason hype he might get, then of course the space where you have to select him if you want to own him does get a little bit earlier. But for me, the dream would be to get him as your bench option in your midfield. Some might not even consider him with that mid-60s average. Others will have done their homework, seen that average when he's been sub-free, and kind of elevate him accordingly. So for me, I'd love to get him as my bench option. I think someone's going to jump as early as an M6 spot, though, and generally the truth is somewhere in the middle about where you should draft a player like James. I think for the Crows, this is a great get, and for fantasy coaches, this could have 25 points per game of upside, which absolutely means we need to sit up and take notice. If he gains forward status or holds forward status, well, this changes everything. All of a sudden, he's a consideration for a guy that may just push the top 10 to 15 forwards going for us. I think it's pretty unlikely. I think he's headed for mid status only, but yeah, one can hope. That is for sure. But what do you think James Peatling is going to do for the Adelaide Crows? Comment and let us know. Where do you see him scoring in 2025? If you haven't subscribed to this channel, make sure you do so. If you're watching this on YouTube, give it a like. If you're listening to the audio podcast, give us a 5-star rating. You can catch up with us across social media, join our Patreon and get access to the Coaches Panel merch. All the details for all of those things are in the description of this episode. Thanks so much for checking in with us once again. We hope you're enjoying the series, and we'll be back again real soon with another player review of someone that's moved clubs this trade and free agency period.